Welcome to this crash course in the Italian wine region of Emilia Romagna. You're going to learn exactly what makes Emilia Romagna a unique wine producing region, what types of wines are out there, and where you should begin your journey in tasting these wines. I'm Tony Margiotta. I'm a wine importer and author of Hidden Gems of Italy. My life's mission is to look for world-class artisanal wines handcrafted in small batches from Italy, many of which have been overlooked and undervalued. My family's from a small village in the Molise region of southern Italy, and I've been traveling to Italy over 20 years, immersing myself in Italian food, wine, and culture. So where is Emilia Romagna? Well, it's a large region in northern Italy. As you can see the arrow here pointing to this blue section. If you were to travel from southern Italy by car in southern Italy to Milano or the Malpensa airport, for example, you'd very likely have to drive through this region to get there. That's because it shares its borders with 6 other Italian regions, which geographically makes it different from other regions. A large portion of its coastline rests on the Adriatic Sea as well. So what makes Emilia Romagna unique? Well, the name Emilia Romagna is a legacy of ancient Rome. Emilia derives from a famous road. It's called Via Emilia. It was an ancient Roman road that connected the city of Piacenza to Rimini. And you can see it in this picture on the left-hand side. See that purple line going all the way down? That's quite a long road. I mean, almost crossing a big section of the peninsula. And this was completed, this road was completed in the year 187 BC, which was an amazing achievement. You can see sort of a characterization of how the Romans did it on the right-hand side here. I mean, what an achievement to build a road from stones this long by hand back in those days. Now, and the road still exists, by the way, which is unbelievable. Now, the word Romagna derives from Romania, the name of the Eastern Roman Empire, and applied to Ravenna after the Western Empire had ceased to exist. And so this city of Ravenna, which you can see over here see my little cursor, this city became a Roman outpost for the Eastern Empire between the year 540 and 751. But the region's history really goes back much further to the time of the Etruscans, 3,000 years ago. Of course, the Romans conquered them, like they conquered everyone else in the Italian peninsula. What else makes Emilia Romagna unique? Well, this region is famous for at least one big city. Everyone knows it. It's called Bologna. The famous city of Bologna is the capital of Emilia Romagna and once known as the Etruscan city called Felsina. Now, Italian food would not be what it is today without the uncountable culinary gifts bestowed upon it by the region of Emilia Romagna. From the stuffed pasta like tortellini from Emilia, to the famous ragu bolognese sauce, to the world's most respected cheese, Parmigiano Reggiano, and pork products like Parma's famous prosciutto di Parma and Bologna's mortadella. The area of Modena, the city of Modena, is also the home of the coveted balsamic vinegar of Modena. Yet another masterpiece of Emilia Romagna that is often imitated but never duplicated. This region is making me hungry. Look at those beautiful pictures. So how should you think about the Emilia Romagna wines? Like all Italian regions, you have their local native grape varietals that are unique to the region, and then also it has its own appellations. So this region is a bit different than some of the other regions that I've covered in some of the other videos, and I'll explain why in a second. You'll notice that I only put 2 white varietals and 2 reds. My other videos, I tend to put a few more varietals, and I'll explain in a second why I did that. So on the whites, we have pignoletto and albana, all right, 2 white grapes. And on the red side, we have the lambrusco grape, and then the other red grape varietal we have is called centesimino. Centesimino, that's a really sexy name for a grape. Okay, so back to the white wines. You'll notice here on the chart that I put a note for the white varietal pignoletto. And that's because they make many, many bubbles, sparkling wines using this varietal. In fact, Emilia Romagna is, you could really refer to it as the land of bubbles as well, because they have so many different types of sparkling wines. They actually have many native grape varietals, but because these sparkling wines are so important in this region, I left a lot of them out and just kind of kept the main ones here. Pignoletto is actually another name for Grechetto. If you saw my video about Umbria, which is the main white varietal in the region of Umbria. But in Emilia Romagna, they call it Pignoletto. It's the same thing. It's the most important white grape in Emilia Romagna, followed by Albana. And you can find both sweet and dry versions of this wine, as well as still and sparkling versions of this wine. So it's extremely important that you check the labels before you buy them. So with the Pignoletto, there's different types of sparkling. So look for the labels. It might say Brut, which is the French way to say dry. Then there's extra Brut, extra dry. You might see a word that says frizzante, which is the Italian word for fizzy, or you can even think of it as lightly sparkling. And then there's the spumante versions, which is the real sparkling and very, very bubbly versions of Pignoletto. Now on the red side, lambrusco is actually a family of red varietals, and there's many different types of lambruscos. I'm going to recommend one in a couple of minutes, but lambrusco is a sparkling red wine made with this varietal. And for those of you who were alive back in the 1970s and 80s, lambrusco was very famous in the United States, made by a brand called Riunite in the 70s and 80s. And America's top 3 imported wines were all lambruscos back in that time, with the Riunite as the #1 spot. But unfortunately, it ruined the reputation of the lambrusco wine for being this overly sweet concoction. Honestly, the wines were disgusting. This is a great example as to how mass producers are damaging the wine industry and ultimately sort of distort the consumer's perception. Lambrusco, when it's made by a small artisanal producer, it is a fantastic wine experience. Even if you don't like sparkling wines and you're a strictly red wine drinker, you have got to check out this wine, because it really does drink like a dry red wine with bubbles. And when you're eating with it, it's really a phenomenal experience. I even go so far as to say, for those of you who are beer drinkers who want to explore more wines but sort of can't get into the taste of wines, lambrusco might be a nice bridge for those of you who are beer drinkers exploring Italian wines. The truth is that lambrusco is one of Italy's oldest varietals, going back to the Etruscan era, some 2,500, 3,000 years ago. And it's a very, very unique wine. It's very delicious, again, if it's made by a small artisanal producer. You know, these wines, these high quality lambruscos that are available today in Italy, they bear no resemblance to the mass produced wines of the 70s and 80s. And then, of course, we have the Centesimino wines, which are found both in sweet and dry versions. Words that you will see for lambrusco and also Centesimino is, you'll see a word secco, which is dry in Italian, or you might see semi-secco, which is off dry, a little bit dry. Then there's dolce. There's a sweet version of lambrusco, so it will be labeled on the front label dolce. Make sure you look for it. Then there's the frizzante, fizzy or lightly sparkling, and then spumante version. That's a lot of different types of wines. My personal taste, for those of you that are curious, would be a lambrusco secco. Lambrusco, a dry one. I'm not a big fan of sweet wines. Okay, and I would probably go with the spumante version. So I would go with secco, dry, and spumante of lambrusco. Lots of bubbles. let's look at the appellation map for a second. Lots of DOCs in the region of Emilia Romagna. They only have a couple DOCGs. Okay, so that's pretty easy to cover. And one of them is the Albana DOCG, which is sweet. And over here, I'm gonna mention it in a little bit, the Colli Bolognese Classico Pignoletto, which is a white wine. So interestingly, none of the red wines have a DOCG status in the region. So what's the first white wine you should try from Emilia Romagna? Colli Bolognese Pignoletto DOC. And again, make sure you read the labels, but I would recommend trying the dry still version, secco. Make sure it's a secco version. But there are sparkling and frizzante versions for those of you who are into bubbles. When you're comparing the Pignoletto sparkling wines to, say, a Prosecco, another sparkling wine from the Veneto region, the Colli Bolognese Pignoletto spumante versions have more complexity than the Proseccos, and they're more food friendly. They're not necessarily better than Prosecco, they're just different. And in many cases, because they're so unknown, they're typically, you can find much cheaper prices than even Proseccos in some wine shops. So if you ever see a bubbly version of this wine, I would definitely pick up one. First red wine you should try, hands down, Lambrusco di Sorbara DOC. And I personally would go with the Secco dry and spumante version. I underline them. So I would look for a Lambrusco di Sorbara with those two words written either on the front or the back label. Secco for the dryness and spumante for the big bubbles. This wine, the Lambrusco, goes great with tomato-based pizzas. So that works out really nice for those of us who love pizza. It also works really well with light sauce pastas covered in Parmigiano Reggiano, of course, from the region. So it can be a very lively and fun dinner. I would definitely do it if I had people over and we were having pizza. This would be like such a hit of a wine. And so that's it for Emilia Romagna. Make sure you subscribe to Gladiator Wine TV so you don't miss out on new videos about artisanal Italian wine and much more. And always remember, great wines are not